Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria, in its just concluded Monetary Policy Committee meeting, made crucial decisions, which includes interventions in crucial sectors to keep the economy afloat. Although the economy may have just technically crawled out of recession with a 0.11% growth, analysts have since weighed on the fragility of the growth, adding that more needs to be done to bring back the economy back on track. The CBN had disclosed that it is working at supporting interventions, particularly in the agricultural, manufacturing, ICT, creative services and other sectors with double-digit growth that helped Nigeria to exit the recession. The Apex Bank is also looking at the possibility of doing more by creating more loans through its targeted credit facilities for our households and SMEs, particularly those that were adversely impacted by COVID-19. Now, what this means is that a support driven towards households and SMEs will stimulate consumption spending that will ultimately lead to aggregate demand and then bolster the country's GDP. Well, I'm not doing this alone, like I said earlier. The senior economist at SPM Professionals, Mr. Paul Alaje, is joining me live from our Abuja studios. Mr. Alaje, good afternoon and thank you very much for your time. Well, I'm not doing this alone, like I said earlier. Mr. Alaje, good afternoon, sir. Can you hear me? Paul Alaje is joining me live from our Abuja studios. Mr. Alaje, good afternoon and thank you very much.
Yeah, good afternoon and thank you for
Mr. Paul Alaje.
Good afternoon.
Well, I think we're trying to connect with Mr. Alaje, who is joining us live. Mr. Paul Alaje, can you hear me now? Mr. Paul, I can see you. Can you hear me? Mr. Paul, how do you react to the retention of all figures by the central bank after the second MPC meeting for the year 2021?
Yes, I can hear you. Good afternoon. Okay, so when you look at the decision by the Monetary Policy Committee, talking about retaining monetary policy rate, talking about MPC and also CRR, as well as liquidity ratio at 30% and CRR at 27.5%, you see that the monetary authority has been faced with tough decisions. On one hand, they are faced with decision of perhaps to increase MPR, and that will mean that inflation will come down. But the weak economy, the economy that's likely crawled out of recession, we may just go back into negative growth, and we have in one more quarter, then we'll be back in recession. So that is not what we want to see. On the other hand, if we reduce rate, what we mean is that even exchange rate will be weaker than what we have it now. So there are horrible decisions, limited decisions that we have. So the best to do is to sit on the fence. People have also questioned authority regarding why would you say you are not changing rate, particularly it is expected authority should have, Central Bank or Monetary Policy Committee should have increased interest rate from MPR, I beg your pardon, from 11.5% to maybe about 12.5 or 13%. But we need to tread with caution, because if that is done because of inflation, we first need to analyze what is leading to current inflation. And I can tell you, security and logistic challenges remain two major issues where we are having high inflation. First of all, what is happening to food inflation? Food inflation is above 20%. Not my figures, according to National Bureau of Statistics. And when you look at logistic challenges, because of ongoing insecurity, more and more people are finding it challenging to go through road transport. You see what we have between Abuja-Kaduna Expressway. We also have so many parts. We hear what happened in I think, Enugu, Port Harcourt just yesterday, where we have a shootout between some persons and security operatives. So more than the insecurity itself, the perception of an unsecured environment is discouraging production is discouraging consumption, and it's also discouraging transaction between convergence, which is also limiting the convergence between the demand side and supply side. So when you have supply continue to stifle or continue to reduce and demand remains the same, at least because of population growth rate, what you will have is increase in prices. So it is not monetary factor that is inducing inflation. That is why I support what a decision of Monetary Policy Committee to hold rate. Let us watch this economy perhaps come out better from the current economic recession and the economic recession we had that just terminated with 0.11% GDP growth rate. Just maybe we may have a more positive growth rate, maybe around 1.5%, which will be about 50% of population growth rate, which is still no growth anyways, but it's better. At that time, we may decide to combat inflation. But we need to wait for what the report that will be published by National Bureau of Statistics. Hopefully, we may have 1% or more or 2% before Monetary Policy Committee may want to decide whether it should adjust monetary policy rate. But you know, even if you adjust monetary policy rate, which is the benchmark for all lending rates in the country. So if you adjust that, another thing you are going to experience is if you increase it, you will see unemployment. Record that National Bureau of Statistics also share unemployment figures at 33% and still counting. Underemployment, on the other hand, is above 20%. When you combine those two figures, it will worry anybody that means well for the country. So I think decision taken by the Monetary Policy Committee, as led by Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele, it is right, even though it's not the best decision, but it's the best among the options that we have this moment today.
Let's stay a little bit with agriculture, which you've touched on. How would you assess all of the efforts by the Apex Bank to support this sector? Are we doing as well as expected, with about 1.48 trillion spent focused on this sector?
Well, intervention has never been what has taken economy from economic quagmire to economic prosperity, but it has helped to reduce the impact of poverty, the impact of COVID, the impact of economic quagmire. Largely, it has helped to reduce the negative impact that we would have had. So one side I totally support, and I think we need more. I think authority, we need to do more to bring more of intervention program to the downtrodden. But that is what central bank, the best it can do. We need to focus on what fiscal authority must do. Fiscal authorities must not be reduced to paying a contract and so on and so forth. It is more of adjusting government expenditure and government income to bring about economic prosperity. Therefore, government must be deliberate in providing infrastructure. Infrastructure, whether you're going to partner with central bank or partner with private sector, to provide one of the things that is so very important, which is infrastructure in rail, which we are doing currently, infrastructure on road, infrastructure in education, infrastructure in agriculture, and beyond all of the infrastructure provision, how do we again make policy to ensure that what we are producing on our farms can now translate to what we can export as finished product? That is when the impact, the support we are getting from central bank, the way we can pay monetary authority and particularly Central Bank of Nigeria back by boosting the foreign reserve, because when we export finished product, it will reduce pressure that we have on Naira today. If you look at the report shared by National Bureau of Statistics just 2 weeks ago, it revealed that almost 90% of our exports were around crude oil. Natural resources we are not adding value. If you flip to what we import the most is refined petroleum. What is wrong with us? What is wrong with us when we have the natural resource, but converting it is what we are unable to do. We have to give away the job by importing what we have. So we decide to give away the job and we complain unemployment is 33.3%. Meanwhile, if we are able to refine, the job would have been with us, direct job as well as indirect job, then we can build a prosperous nation, which is desire, I think, from Mr. President and all the governors, desire they have truly will be how do we make our country prosperous. But if the policy is not right, if the spending is not right, if corruption is not low, I'm afraid most of these will be mere desires and we may not have the right results.
Mr. Paul, let's talk about the trading pattern of the Naira. What do you make of this? some say, analysts say, stylishly, the naira is already devalued. Do you think this currency is appropriately priced?
Okay, so if you look at what is properly priced, I like an analogy to talk about Anthony Joshua, the popular boxer, versus Mr. Macaroni. Mr. Macaroni is talented, Anthony Joshua is talented. But when you put the two of them in a boxing fight and you ask Mr. Macaroni to fight Anthony Joshua, I think we might have concern for someone, definitely not AJ, but Mr. Macaroni. You cannot ask the two of them to fight. When you want to float naira, it's equivalent of saying Mr. Macaroni should find Anthony Joshua. The advanced economy, whose economy is the benchmark, exporting most of the things we consume, according to National Bureau of Statistics, close to 310 billion. In one quarter, Nigeria spent to import vaccine, not for COVID, vaccine for measles and so on and so forth. We have professor of pharmacists, we have pharmaceutical stores. Thankfully, Central Bank has released about 250 million, which is a drop in the ocean. I think more needs to be done through public-private partnership, and authorities should look at the list and listen to what, pay careful attention to what National Bureau of Statistics is publishing regarding our import. So how would we say we want to float our money completely? One, what you first experience is that naira may be moving towards 1,000 naira to a dollar. It means that the minimum wage we pay are significantly reduced, because at the end of the day, UNDP will use 1 naira 90 cents as a benchmark to per day to measure poverty level. Technically, naira has been devalued. I've mentioned it before. We are now looking at about 410 officially, but parallel market as of today is 485. We may deny the parallel market exists, but we are all feeling the impact. Most of the people who perhaps, according to central bank, do not merit export because of 4M and all other protocols and procedures that are too much for small businesses, but they need to import, particularly machines or import unfinished goods, and they have to go to the parallel market. So all of those will be added to the cost of production, which will of course mount on inflation. So technically we have devalued, but it still needs to be managed float, managed flexible rates. That is what Nigeria can sustain. If we leave it to the forces of demand and supply, I'm afraid naira will be almost worthless, if not getting worthless already. But we need to we need to encourage private sector, not just to look at domestic market, but private sector to consider export, because if we don't export in order for us to earn, you see, it's going to be a lot of burden, a lot of pressure on naira and the central bank and foreign reserve. That is why recently you saw central bank, in order to rally around naira, had said we are going to be giving you extra 5 naira for every single dollar that you bring through remittance. What central bank is saying is we want to grow what we earn in terms of hard currency from foreign remittance so that we can have meaningful foreign reserve. But I'm afraid, in spite of that beautiful, wonderful policy, the parallel market still pays more, with at least 75 naira. More and more people, because of selfish interest that drives most human decision, we want to go there. What should we do? Should we use policy to stop parallel market, or should we continue to blink in dark and hope that someday the God of good luck or the God of good economy we whisper or we call on us, then we can hug and say perhaps our economy is getting there. But I'm afraid if we don't take the right decision, tough decision at the right time, economy will continue to bite us even harder.
Yes, we're going to talk about those right and tough decisions that need to be taken. But I want to ask you, Mr. Paul, let's now look at an average Nigerian who has to pay higher electricity tariff, who has to pay more for PMS, that's petrol, who has to contend with issues around purchasing power, which continues to drop by the day. What kind of life do you see an average Nigerian living in 2021 and beyond?
Well, 2021, which is the year immediately after 2020, the great lockdown year, 2020, where a lot of us witnessed the impact of COVID. For me, I think COVID is more of an economic challenge than health challenge that the world has positioned it to be, with individual becoming local government, of household becoming the smallest government, not just because they need to make decisions at home, but because they need to provide for some of the things they should have been given or supported with by authority. And when you ask authority to be very fair, government would say because we have been generating less. Unfortunately, cost of living will continue to increase, while living standard will continue to reduce. What it means is that if the care is not taken, insecurity may continue. More so that we seem to have even created an economy out of insecurity by negotiating with bandits and giving them monies that when they work for 5 years they may not earn. What do we expect? It means it's the shortcut to wealth. The way we clamp down on crypto for some reasons known to government is the same way we should do everything possible to reduce impact of insecurity, because if we solve that to a large extent, we can we can control what food inflation is saying, which will now have implication on the headline inflation. So government needs to do more, and Nigerians, unfortunately, for now, because government revenue continue to reduce, you might be seeing big figures like 13.8 trillion naira budgets. That is not what we are receiving. This is inclusive of borrowing in terms of expenditure, yes, but in terms of revenue, we have never been able to earn up to 13.8 trillion naira, even with weak currency. It is challenging. So authority on one hand, we know how to generate more in terms of making money, in terms of revenue, but more importantly, Nigerians for now may also have to tighten their belts, because there seems to be no option. And I hope that as soon as the security situation starts to improve, we will start to see a relatively better economy. But for now, I hope the authority will do the needful in no time.
Yes. Now let's look at our dear oil and gas industry and investments in that sector. What do you see playing out with all of these challenges we face as a country? That is a sector that still contributes to the growth of the Nigerian economy. Refining is something that is also important. Don't forget, the Port Harcourt refinery will be rehabilitated in a few months.
$1.5 billion, that is the figure federal government has put for the first phase of repairs of Port Harcourt refineries, and hopefully it would help Nigeria to reduce some expenditure on importation. But when you look at history, Nigeria have always turned around the refineries. It's just that the refineries have remained stationed. They've refused to turn in spite of our turnaround maintenance. I am of the opinion that Nigerian government may not necessarily continue to hold 100% shares of those refineries. We need to diversify our investment on the refineries, sell and keep perhaps 20%, if we must maintain that the refinery belongs to Nigeria. Call those who wants to invest in the refinery and who will be operating at the optimum level, not government where people believe that it is government money so we can go for it. Refinery business is a good business where we believe that private sector, if it is driven by private sector, with private sector fund, not government fund, with private sector fund, we can create jobs, one, we can also create income, and we can reduce the pressure we are putting on foreign reserve. So my opinion is government should rather consider partnering with private sector. We have the largest refinery perhaps in West Africa or Africa that will be coming maybe in a year or two in Lagos, but which refinery we compete? I understand the third richest man has also been given license to build refinery. That's true. But for us not to create a monopoly or to create a duopoly or to create an oligopoly, we need to privatized, maybe not fully because of sense of socialism or sense of capitalism, as the case may be, whichever side of the device people belong to. We need to see how private sector can buy into some of these refineries that have not even been useful to us in for some years now, so that production can happen, jobs that have been denied could be created. We can also save our currency. If you look at it, whether we like it or not, government has spent money on refineries. Have we gotten desired results? We turn around, we have not seen impact, but giving it to private sector has always delivered. And that can also bring price down, because the cost of transport, shipping out of Nigeria and bringing back, all of those have been removed. That is when we can talk about that's when we can talk about allowing market forces to adjudicate the price of PMS. Anytime you hear any government say they want the forces of demand and supply, deregulate, or want the forces of demand and supply to adjudicate price, you can ask the question, where will the supply come from? You and I know where the demand will come from. We put gas in our vehicle, we put petrol in our vehicle, we put in our generator. But what will determine the supply? Are we still going to import? Once it is importation, forget it. The price can only go one way, increase. Even when you reduce, it's not going to be sustainable. It is increased. But when we start producing locally, because we have the crude oil, we have the refinery, and more people are able to get into the market, that is when deregulation is true. That is when deregulation is honest, and that is when deregulation can be impactful. If you don't do that, what you see is that you devalue your currency without crude oil prices increasing or coming down, because you have devalued, because you need that currency to exchange for foreign currency to import, is going to have impact on all Nigerians and everyone consuming. That is why people keep wondering. Price of crude oil have continued to go up from the 80s to now. It kept going up. You know why? Because from the 80s to now, the valuation have been consistent. You also know what? Because we have been producing less and less, and now almost near zero what we produce locally. But if you can if you can turn back the ends of time, produce this time with little government involvement, because we know what government has done in business. Government has not been good enterprise. We want private sector, perhaps with the support of government. When you see example, I have the example as everywhere in the country where private sector has supported government, the result has been moderately good, and in some cases very good. I don't want to talk about telecom, so that it doesn't be the only example. In infrastructure, I give you a Papa Osho, the expressway that is being constructed by African richest man. Compare the road with any other road that is federal government, even compare with Lagos Ibadan. The difference is clear within the same southwest region, because private sector involvement is inclusive. You know why? What motivates private sector is profit. So if it's not where, people will go elsewhere, and that's the beauty of having beyond oligopoly. I'm encouraging and advising government to do the right thing, so that in years to come, maybe 5 or 10 years, we will not say, where is the 1.5 billion? Where is its impact? Where is the money? And we're not seeing enough results.
Let's wrap up on this note. Earlier in the week, Fitch also came out with a report saying Nigeria's on the B ratings with a stable outlook. It seems that all is not as bad as we see. What's this collaborative effort that we really need from the fiscal and monetary side? And what are these deliberate efforts or deliberate commitments, or what moves do we really need to catch up in the short, medium, and long term?
So I must tell you, all hope is not lost. People talk about insecurity as if everything is bad. I'm able to come to your studio today in Abuja because there is still some level of security, and you are in Lagos because there is still some level of security. So it is not that the security agencies have performed 0%. The truth is that they are still doing their best. So what we need to do, if we need to provide them with more equipment, we need to do just that. If we need to provide them with more motivation in terms of payment, we need to do that. So while we praise them on one hand, we also need to encourage them to do more, so that we can have better economy, and Nigeria can also be a desirable place for people to live in. So the point of convergence between fiscal and monetary authority, we've continued to see central bank are trying to play around what fiscal authority should do. But fiscal authority, we also need to come up with an economic plan. I understand we have a sustainable, economic sustainable program which Nigerian government seems to run now, and it's a continuation of economic recovery and growth plan, which I had a lot of doubt about. But let's see how this sustainable program we come out to be. For me, I think fiscal and monetary authority need to have more communication, not just for us to hear the central bank governor tell what fiscal authority should do in terms of for economic improvement on television when we are getting MPC. I believe there should be a weekly communication between fiscal and monetary authority. On one hand, you heard fiscal authority said Nigeria may be ready, according to Bloomberg, that Nigeria may be ready for NAFEX rate, but central bank governor said no, quoted clearly, technically saying we are the only one, central bank is the only one that can decide that. But when you look at it, he has really not said we are not using NAFEX rate. He said we participate, we play, and after some time we may decide to adopt. The question is it now time for us to adopt? I think we should see more communication in terms of what fiscal authority could also be advised. What kind of infrastructure should we spend on? So if central bank is playing by giving anchor borrowers loan, by giving loan through anchor borrowers program to farmers, what should fiscal authority do? Do they want to do? Would they be advised to construct road along the areas where the money is disbursed to, so that movement of rice paddy to maybe urban center or where it is consumed will be faster, and government provides security along that area? What that will mean is that the impact of CBN efforts will be felt more, not just to give paddy, and during harvest season you see a lot of paddy price reduced, maybe a bag of rice from 25,000 to 15,000. Immediately after the harvest season, you see the price go back to even worse, 27,000. Again, smuggling of rice is still happening in some areas. So CBN cannot stop smuggling. It is within the ambit of government, by extension fiscal authority, by custom, to ensure that the effort of central bank is felt, because if it is not, farmers will not have meaningful output, the product will not be better priced, and it will affect everybody. So government must work together, particularly fiscal, monetary and trade authority. The three must converge, must work together for economic prosperity that we all want to have.
Mr. Paul Alaje, senior economist, SPM professionals, it's always a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.